I'm Caroline, a 32-year-old project manager who spent 8 years building my reputation at TechVision through hard work and dedication. Everything changed the day. Executive VP Gerald Hamilton called an emergency board meeting and publicly demanded I apologize to his son or lose my job. What he didn't know was that I had come prepared with something that would change everything, a recording that would leave the entire room speechless. If you've ever been wrongfully accused at work, let me know where you're watching from. Like and subscribe if you want to see what happens when someone with power meets someone with proof. My journey at TechVision began 8 years ago when I joined as an entry-level project coordinator fresh out of college with a degree in business management. I was eager, ambitious, and perhaps a little naive about corporate politics. The company was a mid-sized tech firm specializing in enterprise software solutions, known for its innovative products, but also for its intensely competitive environment. From day one, I threw myself into every project, staying late volunteering for the challenging assignments others avoided, and meticulously documenting every success. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and I climbed the ranks steadily, from coordinator to associate, then to senior associate, and finally 3 years ago, to project manager. Each promotion felt like validation of my work ethic and capabilities. TechVision had grown significantly during my time there, expanding from 100 employees to over 500 with offices in 3 states. With growth came increased complexity in company dynamics and politics. The executive floor became increasingly disconnected from the day-to-day operations, making decisions that sometimes baffled those of us implementing them. The cast of characters who would play crucial roles in my story began with Gerald Hamilton, the Executive Vice President of Operations. Gerald joined TechVision 3 years ago from a larger competitor, bringing with him a reputation for ruthless efficiency and political maneuvering. In his early 50s, Gerald was tall with salt and pepper hair, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits. His corner office overlooked the city, and few people were ever invited inside. When Gerald walked through the office, conversations would halt, and people would straighten in their chairs, not out of respect, but fear. His son Bradley Hamilton was hired 6 months ago as a junior analyst. At 26, Bradley had a resume that wouldn't have earned him an interview if his last name had been different. He had bounced between 3 companies in 4 years, with vague job titles and responsibilities. Bradley shared his father's height, but none of his presence. Where Gerald commanded attention, Bradley seemed to demand it with designer clothes, an expensive watch, and a habit of name-dropping executives in casual conversation. Our CEO, Samantha Reynolds, was a brilliant strategist who had grown TechVision from a startup to a respected industry player. At 45, she had earned her position through innovation and business acumen. While generally fair, Samantha had a notable blind spot. She avoided direct conflict with her executive team, preferring to maintain harmony at the leadership level, sometimes at the expense of addressing legitimate concerns. My direct manager, Allison Parker, had been at TechVision even longer than me. She was competent and generally supportive of her team, but extremely cautious around upper management. Pick your battles was her constant refrain, especially when it came to Gerald or any of his allies. Michelle Taylor was my closest ally at work. We had started at TechVision within months of each other, and had supported each other through promotions, difficult projects, and office politics. As a senior developer on my team, Michelle was brilliant at technical solutions, but less comfortable with the corporate chess game that seemed to intensify each year. Rounding out the key players was David Chen, our human resources director. A company veteran of 10 years, David approached every situation by the book. Unfortunately, it often seemed the book was written to protect senior management rather than address employee concerns. The project that would become the battleground for my career was the Anderson Systems integration. Worth over $7 million in annual recurring revenue, it was the largest client implementation TechVision had ever landed. I had been instrumental in securing the contract, presenting the technical solution that ultimately won over the client's skeptical CTO. Leading the Anderson project was the most significant responsibility of my career. My team consisted of 12 people, including developers, analysts, UX designers, and quality assurance specialists. The deadline was aggressive: 6 months to complete what would normally be a 9-month implementation. The executive team had promised this timeline to beat out our main competitor, putting enormous pressure on my team to deliver. TechVision's culture had subtle but unmistakable layers of favoritism. The executive floor had its own keycard access, private dining area, and reserved parking spaces. Information flowed differently depending on your connections. Those in favor received early insights about company changes or opportunities, while others learned through official announcements. I had managed to navigate this landscape by maintaining relationships across departments while letting my results speak for themselves. I wasn't part of the inner circle, but my project success rate had earned me enough political capital to operate with some autonomy. That careful balance was about to be tested in ways I couldn't have anticipated. My first interactions with Bradley Hamilton seemed benign enough. He joined several project teams as a floating resource to gain exposure to different areas of the business, corporate speak, for a role created specifically for him. Our initial conversations were professional, if a bit strained by his obvious inexperience masked beneath unearned confidence. "I'm really excited to bring my perspective to the team," Bradley told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "My father thinks the Anderson project could benefit from some fresh thinking." I nodded politely while noting the immediate reference to Gerald. "We're always open to new ideas, Bradley. I'll get you up to speed on where we are in the implementation process." As I explained the complex requirements and timeline, I noticed Bradley checking his phone multiple times and asking questions that revealed he hadn't reviewed any of the materials I'd sent in advance. Still, I maintained a professional demeanor, chalking it up to first-day disorganization. Looking back, I should have recognized these early warning signs for what they were. Bradley officially joined my Anderson project team 3 weeks after starting at TechVision. Despite my private concerns about his qualifications, I was determined to be fair and professional. During our team kickoff meeting, I introduced him as our newest analyst and assigned him to work with Michelle on user experience research, relatively straightforward work that would give him a chance to learn while contributing meaningfully. I was actually thinking I could take point on the client communications Bradley suggested in front of the entire team. My background in strategic engagement would be valuable there. This was the first I'd heard of any strategic engagement experience, and client communications was one of the most sensitive areas of the project. "Let's start with the UX research first," I replied calmly. "It's crucial for understanding the client's needs before we establish our communication strategy." Bradley's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Of course. Whatever you think is best." In the weeks that followed, I made genuine efforts to mentor Bradley. I scheduled regular check-ins, provided detailed feedback on his work, and created opportunities for him to learn the business. Despite my concerns about his qualifications, I believed in giving everyone a fair chance to succeed. The first clear signs of trouble emerged during our 3rd week working together. Bradley was responsible for compiling user feedback from the client's pilot department, a straightforward but essential task requiring attention to detail. When his report was due, he submitted a superficial analysis missing critical data points. "This needs substantial revision before we can share it with the team," I told him privately in my office. "The client's security requirements aren't addressed at all, and there's no breakdown by department as requested." Bradley leaned back in his chair. "I thought my approach was more elegant. The details you're talking about are in the appendix." There was no appendix attached to his report. When I pointed this out, he shrugged. "I must have forgotten to attach it. I'll send it later." The appendix that arrived in my inbox hours later was clearly hastily assembled and still missing key information. Rather than escalate the issue, I stayed late that evening to reconstruct the analysis properly. It wasn't the first time I'd covered for a team member, and I believed in addressing performance issues directly before involving others. This pattern continued over the next several weeks. Bradley would submit incomplete work miss deadlines or produce analyses that showed fundamental misunderstandings of our software platform. Each time I would provide feedback, offer guidance, and often end up fixing the issues myself to keep the project on track. I began documenting these instances meticulously, saving emails, keeping notes after conversations, and maintaining a log of revised deliverables. This wasn't my usual practice with team members, but something about Bradley's attitude concerned me. He never acknowledged mistakes or seemed interested in improving. The situation escalated during our monthly progress meeting with the project stakeholders. I had prepared a detailed presentation on our implementation timeline with sections assigned to different team members. Bradley was responsible for presenting the user adoption metrics, information I had helped him compile the previous day. When his turn came, Bradley smoothly presented not only his assigned section, but also included several of my key points about the technical architecture. He positioned these insights as his own discoveries and recommendations, even using some of my exact phrasing. As I identified during my analysis, the API integration will require a phased approach to maintain system integrity, he said confidently, repeating the strategy I had developed and explained to him earlier that week. The stakeholders were impressed, complimenting his thorough understanding. I maintained my professionalism during the meeting, but addressed it privately afterward. Bradley, I noticed you presented some of the technical architecture points that weren't part of your section, I said carefully. He smiled. I thought it flowed better that way. The stakeholders seemed to appreciate the comprehensive view. Those were points we hadn't agreed you would cover, and they were presented as your own analysis. His expression hardened. Are you suggesting I stole your ideas? I've been working closely with the development team? These were collaborative insights. This was blatantly untrue, but arguing would only escalate the situation. Going forward, let's stick to the agreed presentation outline to ensure we're not duplicating information. Bradley's undermining wasn't limited to stakeholder meetings. I began hearing from team members that he was making subtle comments questioning my decisions. To Michelle, he suggested that Caroline seems overwhelmed by the project scope. To our client success manager, he wondered aloud if we should have someone with more technical expertise leading this implementation. These comments made their way back to me through concerned colleagues. Michelle was particularly direct. You need to watch your back with Bradley. He's been asking weird questions about project decisions that were made before he even joined the company, almost like he's looking for mistakes. During a team meeting the following week, I presented our updated implementation timeline. Bradley immediately raised concerns about the aggressive schedule. Have we considered that this might be too ambitious? He asked, despite having raised no such concerns during our planning sessions. I'd hate to see us overpromise and underdeliver. The comment cast doubt on work the team had already aligned on. Rather than dismiss his concern, I addressed it professionally. We developed this timeline collaboratively, and the team has confirmed it's achievable. If you have specific concerns about any milestones, let's discuss them after the meeting, so we can address them properly. After the team dispersed, I asked Bradley to share his specific concerns. I'm just looking out for the project's success, he said with a shrug. But honestly, Caroline, you might want to be a bit more receptive to feedback. My father mentioned you have a reputation for being somewhat rigid in your approach. The casual mention of his father's assessment of me was clearly meant to intimidate. Instead, it confirmed my suspicions that Bradley was discussing project matters with Gerald outside of proper channels. That evening, I made an important decision. TechVision's employee handbook explicitly permitted recording work meetings for note-taking purposes, as long as the recordings were kept secure and used only for legitimate business purposes. I had never felt the need to record meetings before, but the escalating situation with Bradley warranted extra documentation. I installed a recording app on my phone and tested it in an empty conference room. The quality was clear, and the app allowed secure storage with password protection. I felt uneasy about taking this step, but my instincts told me I needed to protect myself. As our project deadline approached, Bradley's work remained consistently subpar. Reports were incomplete analyses, contained errors, and client-facing documents required extensive revisions. I was effectively doing his job in addition to my own, staying late most evenings to keep the project on track, while documenting each instance of his underperformance. The tension between us was palpable to the rest of the team. What had started as subtle undermining was becoming increasingly overt with Bradley, openly questioning my decisions in meetings and suggesting alternative approaches that had already been considered and rejected during planning phases he hadn't attended. My anxiety grew as I realized this wasn't simply a case of a struggling team member. It was becoming clear that Bradley was deliberately undermining me, perhaps to position himself for advancement or to justify changes to the project leadership. Either way, the Anderson implementation and my professional reputation were at stake. The pivotal moment came 6 weeks before our final client delivery date. We had a critical milestone presenting the completed user interface designs and workflow automations to the client's executive team. This presentation would determine whether we could proceed to the final development phase or would need to revise our approach. Bradley was responsible for preparing the user workflow analysis, documenting how the client's team would interact with our software in various scenarios. This was a crucial component of the presentation, as it would demonstrate our understanding of their business processes. The analysis was due on Friday for internal review, giving us the weekend to make adjustments before Monday's client meeting. At 4 o'clock on Friday, Bradley still hadn't submitted his section. Just putting the finishing touches on it, he assured me when I stopped by his desk. It'll be in your inbox by end of day. By 6:30, most of the team had left for the weekend, and Bradley's analysis still hadn't arrived. I called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text and an email, marked urgent, emphasizing the importance of getting this done before the weekend. At 8:15, my phone pinged with an email from Bradley. Something came up. We'll try to get to this Sunday night. The clients will understand if we need to reschedule. Rescheduling wasn't an option. The client's CEO had specifically arranged his schedule for this presentation, and postponing would not only create a negative impression, but could potentially delay the entire project timeline. I called Michelle in desperation. Bradley didn't deliver the workflow analysis. We need it for Monday's presentation. Are you serious? Michelle sounded as stressed as I felt. Can't we reschedule? Not without damaging client confidence. I'm going to stay and do it myself. I'll come back in to help, Michelle offered. No, enjoy your weekend. I have access to the user interviews and can recreate the analysis. It's just going to be a long night. I ended up staying until 3 in the morning, meticulously building the workflow analysis from scratch. I had conducted several of the user interviews myself and had access to all the raw data. The work was tedious but straightforward. Exactly the kind of foundational analysis Bradley should have been capable of completing. After a few hours of sleep at home, I returned to the office on Saturday to finish integrating the analysis into our presentation. By Sunday evening, I had a complete, polished presentation ready for Monday morning, including the sections Bradley had failed to deliver. Monday morning arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. Our presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and I had the team gather at 9 for a final review. Bradley was conspicuously absent. At 9:45, just 15 minutes before the client was due to arrive, Bradley strolled into the conference room. Sorry I'm late, he said casually. Traffic was brutal. I handed him a printed copy of the presentation. We're presenting to the client in 15 minutes. I've completed the workflow analysis section that wasn't delivered on Friday. Please review it quickly so you're familiar with the content. Bradley flipped through the pages, his expression darkening as he realized I had completed the work he had failed to deliver. Before he could respond, our receptionist called to inform us that the client team had arrived. The presentation began well. I introduced our team and outlined what we would be covering. Each team member presented their section professionally. When it came time for the workflow analysis, I began presenting the section I had prepared over the weekend. I was 2 slides in when Bradley interrupted. Actually, Caroline, I think there's been a mistake. You're presenting my analysis. The room went silent. I paused, momentarily confused. I'm presenting the workflow analysis that I prepared this weekend when the scheduled deliverable wasn't provided. Bradley's face flushed red. That's completely untrue. I sent you my completed analysis on Thursday. You must have missed it and duplicated work I'd already done. He turned to the client team. I apologize for the confusion. I was stunned by the boldness of his lie. There had been no analysis sent on Thursday or any other day. I had the email trail and document history to prove it. There seems to be some confusion, I said calmly. We can address this internally after the meeting. For now, let's continue with the presentation, so we respect everyone's time. No, I think we should clear this up now, Bradley insisted. I put significant work into this analysis, and I'm seeing my ideas presented as someone else's. The client's CEO shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a short break to allow your team to align. This was exactly the kind of unprofessional display I had worked so hard to avoid. That won't be necessary, I assured him. We can continue and sort out any internal confusion later. Bradley wasn't backing down. I have to object. This presentation includes my intellectual property that was apparently appropriated without acknowledgement. The accusation hung in the air. Taking a deep breath, I turned to my laptop and opened my email. I'm happy to clarify the timeline right now if that would be helpful. I pulled up the email thread showing Bradley's message from Friday night stating he wouldn't be completing the analysis. Bradley's face contorted with anger. That doesn't prove anything. I sent the completed analysis in a separate email that you're conveniently not showing. The client meeting was derailing completely. Samantha, who had joined to observe the important presentation, intervened. Let's proceed with the technical content, and our team can sort out the documentation questions afterward. We managed to complete the presentation, but the damage was done. The client team had witnessed an unprofessional dispute, and their confidence in our organized delivery was clearly shaken. As the clients left the conference room, Bradley approached me, speaking just loudly enough for nearby team members to hear. You should be ashamed of yourself. Taking credit for other people's work shows your incompetence. This project is clearly too complex for someone at your level. I maintained my composure. Bradley, I have documentation of all communication regarding the workflow analysis. I suggest we discuss this privately with Allison. Discuss what? How you're trying to sabotage me because you feel threatened by new talent. My analysis was comprehensive and on time. If you can't manage your inbox, that's your problem. Several team members were watching this exchange their expressions, a mix of discomfort and surprise. Michelle stepped forward. Bradley, I was aware on Friday that Caroline was waiting for your analysis. We all were. Bradley turned on her. So you're part of this too. Interesting how the longest tenured people stick together when they feel their positions are at risk. At this point, I was grateful for my decision to record meetings. This entire exchange from the client presentation through Bradley's accusations was being captured on my phone in my pocket. This conversation isn't productive, I said firmly. We should address this through proper channels. Bradley leaned in closer. You'll regret embarrassing me in front of the client. My father doesn't take kindly to people trying to undermine our family. With that threat hanging in the air, he stormed out of the conference room. The remaining team members looked at me in shocked silence. I took a deep breath. Let's take a few minutes to regroup, then meet to discuss next steps on the project. Whatever personal disagreements exist, our priority is delivering for the client. As they filed out, Michelle stayed behind. You know he's going straight to Gerald, right? I nodded, stopping the recording on my phone. I know, and he's going to tell a very different version of what happened today. What are you going to do? She asked. Document everything and prepare for the fallout. Bradley just made a direct threat referencing his father's position. This isn't about the project anymore. Little did I know just how quickly and severely that fallout would come. True to Michelle's prediction, Bradley went directly to his father. By that afternoon, I received an email from Gerald's executive assistant requesting my immediate presence in his office. The tone was curt with no indication of the meeting's purpose, though I had little doubt about what was coming. Gerald's corner office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased an impressive city view, while his massive desk and tall leather chair created a deliberate imbalance of power with the lower guest chairs positioned in front. Close the door, Gerald instructed without looking up from his computer when I entered. He continued typing for nearly a minute, an obvious power play to establish dominance before our conversation even began. When he finally focused his attention on me, his expression was cold. I understand there was an incident during the Anderson presentation this morning. Yes, I replied evenly. There was a miscommunication about the workflow analysis section. Gerald's eyes narrowed. Miscommunication. Bradley tells me you presented his work as your own in front of the client, that you deliberately excluded him from preparation meetings over the weekend, and then attempted to take credit for his analysis. The accusation was so completely backward that I momentarily struggled to respond. That's not accurate, Gerald. Bradley was assigned the workflow analysis, which was due Friday. When he didn't deliver it, I created it myself over the weekend to ensure we were prepared for today's client meeting. Gerald dismissed this with a wave. Bradley showed me the email where he sent you his completed analysis on Thursday. He also explained how you've been undermining him since he joined the team, assigning him menial tasks below his qualifications, and taking credit for his strategic insights. I have the complete email thread documenting what actually happened, I said, reaching for my phone to show him. That won't be necessary. Gerald cut me off. I've seen the relevant communication. What concerns me more is this pattern of behavior toward Bradley. Several team members have apparently expressed concerns about your leadership style. This was news to me. Which team members? That's confidential, Gerald replied. The point is, this project is too important to be jeopardized by personal conflicts. Bradley has suggested that perhaps you're overwhelmed by the scope and complexity of the implementation. I maintained my composure despite my rising anger. The Anderson project is on schedule and meeting all quality benchmarks. The team is performing exceptionally well under significant time pressure. Today's issue was the first serious disruption we've experienced, and it was caused by Bradley's failure to deliver his assigned work and his subsequent behavior in the client meeting. Gerald's expression hardened. I find it interesting that you're so quick to blame a new team member rather than examining your own leadership failures. A strong manager helps their team succeed, not publicly criticizes them. I agree completely, I said, which is why I spent my weekend doing Bradley's work rather than entering the client meeting unprepared or throwing him under the bus for not delivering. And yet here you are still blaming him, instead of taking responsibility as the project manager. Gerald leaned forward. Caroline, your performance has been adequate until now, but I'm concerned about your ability to collaborate effectively with all team members. I'll be keeping a closer eye on the Anderson implementation moving forward. The threat was clear. Is there anything else? I asked. Yes. I expect you to mentor Bradley more effectively. He represents the future of this company, and his success reflects on all of us. That will be all. I left Gerald's office with my hands shaking from suppressed anger and anxiety. This wasn't just unfair, it was a complete inversion of reality, and Gerald had made it clear he had no interest in the truth. My next step was human resources. David Chen, the HR director, welcomed me into his office with professional courtesy, but his expression became guarded when I explained the situation with Bradley and Gerald. This is a sensitive matter involving an executive, David said after listening to my account. Do you have documentation of the performance issues with Bradley? I showed him my detailed log of Bradley's missed deadlines, incomplete work, and the email thread from the weekend. I also have recordings of several meetings, including today's client presentation, where Bradley falsely accused me of stealing his work. David frowned at the mention of recordings. While recording is permitted under company policy, using recordings in disputes can escalate tensions. Have you shared your concerns directly with Bradley before coming to HR? Yes, multiple times. I've provided constructive feedback and clear expectations, but the situation has only worsened. Today he essentially threatened me, saying I would regret embarrassing him and referencing his father's position. David made some notes, but didn't look up. What outcome are you hoping for from HR's involvement? I need Bradley's behavior documented officially. I'm concerned about retaliation, especially given Gerald's response when I tried to discuss the issue with him. I understand your concerns, David said carefully. However, performance management should generally happen through the reporting structure first. Have you discussed this with Allison? I'm meeting with her next. But given that this involves an executive's son and potential retaliation, I wanted HR to be aware. David nodded. I'll make note of our conversation. My recommendation is to continue documenting any issues thoroughly and work with Allison on a performance improvement plan for Bradley, if appropriate. I left David's office feeling unsupported. He had acknowledged my concerns without committing to any action, effectively sending me back through normal channels despite the obvious power imbalance at play. Allison's response wasn't much more encouraging. While she believed my account of events, her advice centered on political survival rather than addressing the actual problem. You need to find a way to make this work, she advised. Gerald has the CEO's ear, and Bradley isn't going anywhere. Document everything, but also consider giving Bradley more visible responsibilities where he can succeed. Even if that means compromising the project, I asked. Allison sighed. Even if. Sometimes project success isn't just about deliverables, Caroline. It's about navigating the organization. By the next morning, the office atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Colleagues who normally stopped by my desk for casual conversations suddenly seemed busy. In the break room, conversations paused when I entered. Bradley, meanwhile, walked the halls with renewed confidence, stopping to chat with senior managers, who previously hadn't given him much attention. Michelle confirmed my suspicions during lunch. There's a rumor going around that you're on thin ice. Bradley's telling people you tried to take credit for his work and that his father had to step in to protect the Anderson project. That's completely backwards, I said, frustrated. I know that, and most of the team knows it too. But people are scared. Nobody wants to get on Gerald's bad side. That afternoon, I received an official warning letter in my email. The letter cited unprofessional conduct during client presentations and failure to effectively manage team resources, requiring me to develop an improvement plan with Allison. The timing made it clear this had been initiated immediately after my meeting with Gerald without any real investigation. Just as I was processing this development, a company-wide calendar invitation appeared in my inbox. Gerald had scheduled an emergency board meeting for the following morning regarding the Anderson project status and leadership. My name was on the attendee list, along with the executive team board members and project stakeholders. Minutes later, Allison called me into her office, closing the door behind me. "This doesn't look good," she said without preamble. "I just got off the phone with Samantha's assistant. Gerald has been meeting with her all afternoon, and word is he's pushing for a leadership change on the Anderson project." My stomach dropped. Based on one manufactured incident, based on his son's account of ongoing issues that supposedly culminated in yesterday's meeting, Allison leaned forward. "Caroline, I'm telling you this as someone who respects your work. Gerald is building a case to have you removed from the project, possibly from the company. Tomorrow's meeting is essentially a public execution." "But that's completely unjustified," I protested. "The project is on track. The client is happy with our progress despite yesterday's awkwardness." Justified doesn't matter when it comes to executive politics. Gerald has been looking to place Bradley in a leadership role since he arrived. Your project is high profile with a significant budget, perfect for showcasing his son's supposed talents. I thought about the weeks of documentation I had collected, the recordings of meetings, the email threads. So I'm just supposed to accept being pushed out based on lies. Allison looked uncomfortable. "I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying you need to be prepared for what's coming. Gerald wouldn't call this meeting unless he was confident in the outcome." That night was one of the most stressful of my professional life. I reviewed all my documentation, organized my evidence, and prepared for every possible scenario. The recording of the client meeting was particularly damning for Bradley, clearly showing his false accusations and threatening behavior afterward. As I prepared for bed, my phone lit up with a text from Michelle. "Whatever happens tomorrow, many of us know the truth. Don't let them break you." Her support meant everything. But as I tried to sleep, the same question kept circling in my mind. Was I really prepared to risk everything by challenging an executive VP in front of the board? My career at TechVision, possibly my entire professional reputation, hung in the balance. The alternative, staying silent while being falsely accused, too, was equally unpalatable. By morning I had made my decision. I would bring the recordings as a last resort. I hoped it wouldn't come to using them, but I wouldn't allow myself to be publicly humiliated based on lies without defending myself. The boardroom at TechVision occupied most of the top floor, with a massive oval table surrounded by leather chairs and wall-to-wall windows showcasing the city skyline. By 9:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting, the room was already filling with executives and board members, creating a low hum of conversation that died down when I entered. I chose a seat in the middle of the table, not wanting to appear either too assertive by sitting near the head or too submissive by hiding at the far end. Michelle and two other team members from the Anderson project arrived shortly after giving me supportive nods, as they found seats along the wall behind the main table. At precisely 10 o'clock, Samantha Reynolds entered with Gerald Hamilton close behind. The CEO took her place at the head of the table, while Gerald sat to her immediate right. Bradley slipped in moments later, taking the seat beside his father. The strategic positioning was obvious. The three of them formed a power block at the head of the table. "Thank you all for making time for this important discussion," Samantha began. "Gerald has raised some concerns about the Anderson implementation that require immediate attention." She nodded to Gerald, effectively handing him control of the meeting. He stood buttoning his suit jacket in a practiced gesture. "As you all know, the Anderson Systems implementation is the largest client project in TechVision's history. Its success is crucial, not only for revenue, but for our reputation in the enterprise market." Gerald paced slowly at the head of the table. Yesterday, an incident during the client presentation raised serious concerns about the current project leadership. All eyes turned to me. I maintained a neutral expression despite my racing heart. "My son Bradley, who has been working on the project team, has reported ongoing issues with the project management approach. These came to a head yesterday, when his work was presented without attribution, and he was publicly undermined in front of the client." Bradley nodded, solemnly playing the role of wronged party with remarkable commitment. "This incident is, unfortunately, not isolated," Gerald continued. "It appears to be part of a pattern of exclusion and undermining that has created a toxic team environment and put the project at risk." Several board members exchanged glances. One of them, an older woman named Margaret, whom I'd only met briefly at company events, spoke up. "What exactly happened at this client meeting?" Before I could respond, Gerald answered for me. Caroline presented analysis work that Bradley had completed and submitted days earlier without acknowledgement. When Bradley appropriately pointed out that the work was his, she became defensive and created an awkward situation that damaged our client relationship. "That's not what happened," Michelle called from her seat along the wall. Gerald turned, clearly irritated by the interruption. "This discussion is for the board and executive team. We'll hear from project team members if needed." Samantha intervened smoothly. "Perhaps we should hear Caroline's perspective on the situation." All attention shifted to me. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my mind throughout the sleepless night. "Thank you, Samantha," I began calmly. "The characterization of yesterday's events is completely inaccurate. The workflow analysis was assigned to Bradley with a Friday deadline for our Monday client meeting. When Friday evening arrived with no deliverable, I reached out multiple times. Bradley eventually responded that something had come up, and he wouldn't be completing the work. I opened my laptop to display the email exchange on the room's projection screen, but Gerald interrupted. "We've all seen selected emails. The complete exchange tells a different story." Bradley nodded. "I sent the completed analysis on Thursday. Caroline is only showing part of our communication." The boardroom was tense, as accusation and counter-accusation hung in the air. Gerald seized the moment. "The fundamental issue isn't just one missed email or deadline. It's about leadership. The Anderson project needs someone who can unite the team, not create divisions. Someone who lifts others up, rather than taking credit for their work. He was building toward his conclusion, and I could see where this was headed. Gerald turned to face me directly. Caroline, your technical skills are not in question, but this situation has made it clear that you're not the right person to lead our most important client implementation. I'm recommending to the board that we reassign you effective immediately. The room was silent. This was exactly the scenario Allison had warned me about. A public execution designed to leave no room for recovery. Before you make that recommendation official, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'd like to present some relevant information. Gerald waved dismissively. We've heard enough accounts of yesterday's... Actually, I interrupted, surprising, even myself, with my boldness. I think it's important that the board has complete information before making decisions that affect our largest client project. I turned to Bradley. You claim you submitted the workflow analysis on Thursday, and that I presented it as my own. Is that your testimony to this board? Bradley straightened, clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight. Yes, that's exactly what happened. I have witnesses who saw how hard I worked on that analysis. I nodded thoughtfully. And after the presentation, did you accuse me of stealing your work and threaten that I would regret embarrassing you because of your father's position in the company? Absolutely not, Bradley scoffed. I expressed concern about being undermined, but I never made threats. This was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. I'd like to present evidence that contradicts these claims. I stood and walked to the projection system at the center of the table. Gerald started to object, but Margaret, the board member, who had spoken earlier, raised her hand. I think we should hear all perspectives before making any decisions. I connected my phone to the projector and opened my recording app. TechVision's employee handbook explicitly permits recording meetings for note-taking purposes. I began recording team meetings several weeks ago to ensure accurate documentation of decisions and action items. Gerald's face darkened. This is inappropriate. Recording private conversations. Not private conversations, I corrected. Work meetings relevant to the project as permitted by company policy. Before he could object further, I pressed play on the first recording. The room fell silent as Bradley's voice filled the speakers, clear and unmistakable. From Friday evening, something came up. We'll try to get to this Sunday night. The clients will understand if we need to reschedule. I paused the playback. This directly contradicts Bradley's claim that he submitted the analysis on Thursday. Without waiting for response, I played the second recording, from the client meeting itself. The audio captured Bradley's accusation, my calm response, showing the email thread, and the client's discomfort. Most importantly, it captured Bradley's exact words after the clients left. You'll regret embarrassing me in front of the client. My father doesn't take kindly to people trying to undermine our family. The boardroom was completely silent. Even Gerald seemed momentarily speechless as the recording continued, documenting Bradley's threat word for word. I had more recordings, weeks of meetings, showing Bradley's pattern of taking credit for others' work, missing deadlines, and undermining team members. But the two clips I had played were the most damning, directly disproving the claims made to this board. Samantha broke the silence. Gerald, did you hear this recording before bringing these allegations to me? Gerald's composure slipped momentarily. These recordings are taken out of context and potentially edited. They don't reflect the full situation. They're unedited and date-stamped, I replied. And I have many more documenting a pattern of behavior over several weeks. Bradley attempted damage control. Anyone can misunderstand a conversation. What I meant was, what you meant when you threatened me using your father's position, I asked quietly. The board members exchanged glances. Margaret spoke again. I think we need to take a step back and consider what we've just heard. Gerald realized he was losing control of the narrative. These recordings don't change the fundamental issues with Caroline's management style. Multiple team members have expressed concerns. Which team members? Michelle interrupted from her seat against the wall. because those of us actually working on the project have seen exactly what's captured in those recordings. Bradley has consistently failed to complete his work, taken credit for others' contributions, and created division within the team. The other team members beside her nodded in agreement. Samantha looked troubled. "Gerald, you told me you had verified these allegations with multiple sources." "I did," Gerald insisted. "But this isn't just about one incident. It's about ensuring our largest client has the best possible project leadership." "I agree completely," I said. "The Anderson implementation is on schedule, meeting all quality benchmarks, and the client has expressed satisfaction with our progress at every milestone review. The only significant issue occurred yesterday when Bradley falsely claimed credit for work he hadn't completed." Bradley's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is a setup. She's obviously been planning this ambush for weeks. By recording you admitting you didn't do your assigned work and then threatening me," I asked. "I didn't set you up to do either of those things." Samantha raised her hand for silence. "I think we need to pause this discussion. The board and executive team will need time to review all the evidence presented today." She turned to Gerald and Bradley. "We'll also need to conduct a proper investigation into these allegations and counter-allegations." Gerald began to protest, but Samantha cut him off with uncharacteristic firmness. "This is a serious situation with potential legal implications for the company. We will follow proper procedure." She turned to me. "Caroline, please provide copies of all relevant recordings and documentation to my office immediately after this meeting." Of course, I agreed. "This meeting is adjourned for now. Caroline, Gerald, Bradley, please remain available today for follow-up discussions. Everyone else, thank you for your time." As the room cleared, Gerald leaned over to whisper something to Bradley, whose face had shifted from anger to anxiety. Samantha approached me as I disconnected my phone from the projector. "My office, 15 minutes, she said quietly. "Bring everything you have." I nodded, collecting my materials as the boardroom emptied. Michelle caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle thumbs up. I had stood my ground, but the battle was far from over. Gerald Hamilton was still an executive VP with significant influence, and I had just publicly challenged his integrity. As I headed to Samantha's office with my evidence in hand, I realized there was no going back. Whatever happened next would permanently alter my career at TechVision, for better or worse. Samantha's assistant directed me to wait outside her office. Through the glass walls, I could see Gerald already inside, gesturing emphatically, while Samantha listened with a neutral expression. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, Gerald emerged, shooting me a cold glare as he passed. "She'll see you now," the assistant said. Samantha's office was minimalist and organized, reflecting her structured approach to leadership. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "That was quite a presentation in there," she said once I was seated. "I didn't want to have to play those recordings," I admitted, but I couldn't let false accusations go unchallenged. "Understandable." Samantha tapped her pen against her desk thoughtfully. "I need you to transfer all recordings and documentation to our legal team immediately. This situation has potential liability implications that we need to assess." I nodded. "I've prepared a secure file with everything organized chronologically." "Good." She fixed me with a direct gaze. "Caroline, I want to be transparent with you. This is a complicated situation. Gerald is an important member of the executive team, and this incident puts me in a difficult position." My heart sank. Despite the clear evidence, company politics might still prevail. "That said," Samantha continued, "the recordings you played raise serious concerns about both Gerald's and Bradley's conduct. We cannot ignore direct evidence of threats and misrepresentation." "What happens now?" I asked. "For now, I'm asking you to go home and wait. Take the rest of the day and tomorrow. We'll be conducting interviews with your team members and reviewing all the evidence. I need you to refrain from discussing this with colleagues until we complete our process." Being sent home felt like punishment despite Samantha's neutral tone. "What about the Anderson project? We have deliverables due this week." "Allison will temporarily oversee the team. This isn't a reflection on your performance, Caroline. It's simply to give us space to resolve this situation properly." As I left Samantha's office, I felt a mix of vindication and anxiety. I had defended myself with irrefutable evidence, but the outcome remained uncertain. The power dynamics at TechVision hadn't changed. Gerald was still an executive VP with considerable influence. The walk through the open office to collect my things was excruciating. Colleagues watched with poorly concealed curiosity as I packed my laptop and a few personal items. Michelle approached as I was preparing to leave. "What happened?" she whispered. "I'm being sent home while they investigate," I replied quietly. "I can't really talk about it right now." Michelle squeezed my arm. "We've got your back. The team knows the truth." Her support meant everything, but as I drove home, doubts crept in. Had I just committed career suicide by challenging an executive so publicly? Even with evidence on my side, Gerald could make my position untenable through 1,000 small decisions that would never appear on a recording. The next 36 hours were some of the most stressful of my life. I compulsively checked my email and phone, jumping at every notification. Several team members sent supportive messages. Michelle texted updates about the office atmosphere, legal team interviewing everyone. Gerald and Bradley both locked in meetings all day. Lots of closed-door conversations on executive floor. On the evening of the second day, I received a cryptic text from Allison. "Things are happening. Be ready for early morning meeting tomorrow." I barely slept that night, running through countless scenarios in my mind. Would I be offered a settlement to leave quietly, transferred to a different department? Or would Gerald somehow turn this around on me despite the evidence? The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit armor for whatever was to come. The email from Samantha's assistant had specified a 9 a.m. meeting in the CEO's office. When I arrived, David from HR was already waiting outside Samantha's office. His typically impassive face revealed nothing as he nodded a greeting. "They're ready for us," he said, opening the door. Inside, Samantha sat behind her desk with Gerald to her right. A third chair was empty, presumably for me. The tension in the room was palpable. "Thank you for coming in, Caroline," Samantha began formally. "Please have a seat." I sat, keeping my expression neutral, despite my racing heart. After reviewing all the evidence and conducting interviews with team members, we've come to some decisions regarding the situation, Samantha continued. "David is here to document our conversation and answer any policy questions." Gerald sat rigidly in his chair, staring at a point somewhere over my head. His body language suggested someone enduring, rather than participating in the meeting. First, Samantha said, "Gerald has something to say." Gerald cleared his throat, finally meeting my gaze with cold eyes. "Upon review of the full situation, it appears there was a misunderstanding regarding Bradley's contributions to the Anderson project. I acknowledge that my initial assessment was based on incomplete information." The carefully worded non-apology was clearly scripted by legal or HR, stripped of any actual accountability. Still, having Gerald admit even this much was significant. In light of this misunderstanding, Gerald continued stiffly, "I withdraw my recommendation regarding your removal from the project leadership." Samantha took over smoothly. "We've conducted a thorough review of the Anderson project status and team dynamics. The evidence supports that your leadership has kept the project on track and that the concerns raised were not substantiated." I maintained my professional composure, despite the surge of validation I felt. "Thank you for conducting a fair review." "That brings us to next steps," Samantha said. "We're making several changes effective immediately." She outlined the decisions I would be restored as lead on the Anderson project, with an expanded budget and additional resources. My reporting line would change. Instead of reporting to Allison, I would report directly to Samantha for the duration of the implementation. This was ostensibly to reflect the project's importance, but clearly also to remove Gerald's indirect influence. The most significant news came next. "In recognition of your exemplary handling of this complex project, we're offering you a promotion to senior project manager with an appropriate compensation adjustment." Samantha slid a document across the desk. "David can review the details with you after our meeting." A quick glance showed a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. Under different circumstances, this would have been a moment of pure professional triumph. "What about Bradley?" I asked the question, hanging awkwardly in the air. Gerald tensed visibly, but Samantha answered, "Bradley is being reassigned to the operations department, where he'll work under Marcus Stevens. This will give him an opportunity to develop his skills in a different area of the business." Marcus was known as a strict by the book manager, who tolerated neither incompetence nor excuses. It was effectively a demotion, disguised as a development opportunity. Additionally, Samantha continued with a meaningful glance at Gerald. "There have been some adjustments to our executive structure to ensure better alignment with company values." Though she didn't elaborate, the implication was clear. Gerald had faced consequences as well. David spoke for the first time. "We've also reviewed our policies regarding nepotism and conflict of interest. The board has approved updates that will be announced company-wide next week." The meeting concluded with logistical details about my return to the project. As we prepared to leave, Samantha asked me to stay behind for a moment. Once Gerald and David had left, her formal demeanor softened slightly. That couldn't have been easy, standing up to an executive in front of the board. It wasn't, I admitted, but I couldn't let false accusations go unchallenged. Samantha nodded. "You should know that Gerald has been moved from Executive VP to VP of Special Projects. The executive designation carried certain privileges and authorities that the board felt were inappropriate given the circumstances." This explained Gerald's tense demeanor. He had been demoted, a significant blow to someone so focused on status and power. "The recordings were illuminating," Samantha continued, "not just for the specific incident, but for what they revealed about leadership behavior that doesn't align with our values. I want to be clear. You were right to defend yourself, and the company is better for having these issues brought to light." I left Samantha's office feeling a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and lingering anxiety. The situation had resolved in my favor professionally, but I knew the personal dynamics would be complicated moving forward. Gerald might have been demoted, but he remained a powerful figure in the company with a clear reason to resent me. My return to the office was awkward but affirming. Colleagues who had avoided eye contact days earlier now offered congratulations on my promotion. Michelle organized an impromptu team lunch to celebrate, though we carefully avoided discussing the specifics of what had happened. Bradley cleared out his desk that afternoon, barely acknowledging anyone as he left. Through the office grapevine, I learned that his new role under Marcus included significantly more administrative work and less client contact. Gerald remained in the office, but was noticeably less visible. His corner office was reassigned to another VP, and he moved to a smaller space down the hall. When we passed in the corridors, he would give a curt nod, but never speak directly to me. The Anderson project moved forward with renewed energy. Without Bradley's disruptions, the team functioned more cohesively, and we hit our subsequent milestones without issue. The client never directly mentioned the awkward presentation, though they seemed relieved by the consistent leadership and communication in the weeks that followed. My new role came with increased visibility and responsibility, but also with the subtle burden of being the one who stood up to an executive. Some colleagues treated me with a new respect, while others seemed wary, perhaps wondering if they might someday find themselves on the wrong side of one of my recordings. I was careful to be transparent about when and why I recorded meetings moving forward, making it clear this was a documentation practice rather than a gotcha tactic. Still, the experience had changed how I navigated office politics, making me more cautious about trusting the system to work without evidence to back me up. 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, we successfully completed the Anderson Systems implementation. The client was so pleased with the results that they signed an expanded contract for additional services, bringing another $4 million in annual recurring revenue to TechVision. Samantha hosted a celebration dinner for the team, publicly recognizing our efforts and resilience. My promotion to senior project manager had evolved into a broader role. I now led a portfolio of strategic implementations and mentored junior project managers. My team had grown from 12 to 20 people, and my new office, small but with an actual door, symbolized my elevated status in the company hierarchy. The corporate landscape at TechVision had shifted in subtle but important ways. The updated nepotism policy required disclosure of family relationships and prohibited direct reporting lines between relatives. Hiring processes became more transparent with documented justification required for all new positions and promotions. Gerald remained with the company, but operated as a shadow of his former self. His new role as VP of Special Projects effectively isolated him from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on long-term initiatives that required little team management. We maintained professional cordiality when required to interact, but there was an unspoken understanding that our paths would cross as little as possible. Bradley lasted just under 2 months in his new role before departing for what was described as an exciting opportunity with another company. The official announcement wished him well, but the office gossip suggested Marcus had documented a pattern of performance issues that made his position untenable. I felt no satisfaction in his departure, only relief that the direct source of tension was gone. My relationship with Allison had evolved into something more collegial, as we now operated at similar levels in the organization. She acknowledged once during a rare candid moment that she had expected me to accept Bradley's behavior as an unavoidable consequence of office politics. "I underestimated your courage," she admitted, "and maybe overestimated the protection Gerald's position afforded him. We all did." Michelle had been promoted to lead developer on my recommendation, finally receiving recognition for the technical expertise and leadership she had demonstrated for years. We still met for lunch regularly, our friendship strengthened by having weathered the crisis together. "You know, I recorded a couple meetings myself. After everything happened with Bradley," she confessed during one lunch. "Just in case. Is that terrible?" "Not terrible," I assured her. "Just a reflection of what we learned. Trust has to be earned, especially in professional environments where power imbalances exist." This was perhaps the most significant personal change for me, a recalibration of how I approached workplace relationships and documentation. I had always been organized, but now I was strategic about creating records of important decisions and conversations. Not from paranoia, but from a clear-eyed understanding of how quickly situations could devolve without evidence. The experience had been painful, but ultimately transformative. For years I had built my career on the belief that exceptional work would speak for itself, that merit would triumph over politics. The reality was more complicated. Excellence was necessary but not sufficient in complex organizations, where personal agendas and relationships influence decisions as much as performance metrics. I began mentoring other women in the company, particularly those in male-dominated departments, or reporting to powerful executives. Without sharing the specific details of my experience, I offered guidance on documentation practices, setting boundaries, and navigating office politics. "Always keep receipts" became my unofficial mantra, not because you expect to need them, but because their existence often prevents situations where you would. One unexpected outcome was my growing confidence in speaking truth to power. Having faced down an executive VP in front of the board and survived, even thrived, I found myself less intimidated by hierarchical structures. I became known for asking direct questions in executive meetings and advocating for my team's needs without hesitation. Samantha noticed this evolution. During my 6-month review after the promotion, she commented, "You found your voice, Caroline. It's making you not just a better manager, but a better leader." The healing process wasn't linear. There were still moments when I would tense up before certain meetings, or feel a flash of anxiety when conflicts arose. The experience had left its mark, creating a wariness that hadn't existed before. But alongside that wariness came wisdom, a deeper understanding of organizational dynamics, and my own capacity for resilience. I had learned that documentation wasn't just about protection, it was about clarity. Recording important meetings eliminated the he said, she said ambiguity that often plagued workplace disputes. Clear records created accountability, not just for others, but for myself as well. More importantly, I had discovered that standing up for myself didn't have to mean burning everything down. My approach had been measured and evidence-based, focused on correcting falsehoods rather than seeking revenge. This distinction had allowed me to maintain my professional relationships and reputation even while challenging a powerful executive. The experience changed how I viewed my career trajectory. Before, I had focused primarily on technical excellence and project outcomes. Now I understood that organizational awareness and strategic relationship management were equally important skills for long-term success. I began studying leadership more intentionally, seeking mentors who had successfully navigated complex corporate environments while maintaining their integrity. 6 months after the confrontation, I was invited to join TechVision's Leadership Development Program, a selective initiative typically reserved for those identified as future executives. The invitation came directly from Samantha with a note: "Your handling of the Anderson project demonstrated not just technical capability, but the kind of principled leadership we need more of." As I reflect on the entire experience now, I recognize that what could have ended my career at TechVision instead became a catalyst for growth. The easy path would have been to accommodate Bradley's behavior to look the other way, as Gerald had suggested. Standing up for myself and for the truth had been terrifying in the moment, but ultimately transformative. The most important lesson wasn't about recordings or documentation, or even office politics. It was about the power of quiet courage, the willingness to stand firm in your truth, even when facing seemingly insurmountable opposition. It was about recognizing that your value isn't determined by others' assessments, especially when those assessments are based on false information. For anyone facing similar situations, my advice is simple: document meticulously, speak truthfully, and stand your ground when it matters. Not every confrontation will end in vindication, but compromising your integrity guarantees a different kind of loss. Have you ever had to stand up to someone in a position of power? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that your experiences might help someone else facing a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is worth it, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening, and remember, your truth matters even when powerful voices try to drown it out.